Hello, everybody. I just wanted to quickly welcome you all for dialing in and attending my session, and really to introduce and thank you all for attending the event. I guess this is the third event we put together, and I think to maximize your time and to give you the choice of the range of topics and speakers and to make it as relevant as we can, we opted for a virtual event again, just so that we can cover the breadth and depth in terms of our 3-day virtual event. So I hope you get to enjoy it and you make the most of it. And I'm just going to dig into some slides now, walk through and kick the event off. Okay, so let's get going. So for the next 40 minutes or so, you'll have myself before we move into the second session on the hour. So again, I guess the theme could creating sustainability in your supply chain. When you look at sustainability and part of ESG are becoming very important for both public and private companies in modern days, and the reporting of such things around policies, supply chain commitments, human capital, data security, all of those things are becoming very relevant in the modern world. And we put this event together effectively touching a number of those things and how they play out specifically in the security space and landscape that we operate. I wanted to also thank our sponsors. These events are always very hard to pull together, and whilst we're, I guess, in the box seat and my team has pulled it all together, we can't do it without our sponsors. A new sponsor and a new partner effectively to us in recent months, Cyfirma, you'll hear from in the coming days as well. Also, Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, based over in the US in Virginia State. We've been working with them for over a year now, closely with their integration and consulting partner, Crossroads Innovation Group, XIG. So those are our three primary gold sponsors, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank them. In terms of the next 3 days, we're going to touch on sustainability and the supply chain and the importance of that, and the role security has, but also not just in the IoT and the emerging AI market or rapidly emerging AI market, but also the convergence of that. So we've got, and I've just picked out a couple here. You'll be able to hear from Wild, that's really going to focus on a contributor to global food security and the impact they can have. You've got people referring to about automation in the sustainable supply chain. So that's from Catapult. One of our investors and a key partner, and Benson George will be speaking on behalf of Venify, that we do a lot of work with in both in the field and from a product marketing perspective. And also we're delighted to have a number of Microsoft speakers. And I know I've met Rob Curtin, and you'll hear other people, again, understanding the impact of AI, specifically in the manufacturing sector. And zero trust comes up a lot. How do you do it? How can you achieve it? Is it achievable? And both David Ari and Khalil from our sponsors I just touched on will be talking that as well. And then just to pick one more, and there are many other events, but just to give you a flavour of the type of things we'll be covering, there's two lovely ladies, Jennifer and Amy, talking very much about the automotive and how the car is becoming the heart of IoT. And just from our business, when we see the rate of adoption and the rate of acceleration or digital acceleration in the automotive industry, is very evident. So that'll be exciting to watch. So just to make the most of the day, I know many of you have either signed up for all or you've signed up for several sessions, but I'll just encourage you to make sure you've signed up for the relevant sessions that suit you. You obviously see the Bright Talk link there, and you can go through the various sessions. You're able to download the materials provided along each of the discussions or presentations or talks. We would encourage you to visit the sponsor booths in between sessions for extra information and active engagement. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to connect with any of us or any of the guest speakers, and hopefully everyone will then make contact and form some form of follow-up as required. And if you can't make the session, not to worry, they'll all be on playback. In fact, there's always more people that actually watch the playbacks than the actual sessions. So it is important they're all recorded, and they will all be made available for everyone to use. So enjoy the 3 days, and hopefully you get significant value from it. Just to, I guess, move on, and when you reflect, we've been in a significant state of flux and change, and it's definitely accelerated. It wasn't that long ago when we were all focused on energy efficiency, inflation, cost of living, interest rates, significant financial impacts, being affected around energy and fallout from the Russian-Ukraine war. And I think, just in a matter of 3 or 4 months, what's very interesting is how this has moved on. And a number of the themes that we refer to that are very topical for customers we speak to, and a C-level agenda. Yes, of course, economic uncertainty is still important, but AI and machine learning, and driven by ChatGPT specifically, are big things. Shortages that impact the supply chain and how you make that sustainable continues. And Industry 4.0, again, topical area, and we touch on that, and as does the cloud and the cybersecurity landscape around the cloud, on-premise or in the cloud, and what's my security posture or considerations. So there's a number of things, and I think we touch on these in terms of the agenda over the coming days, so hopefully they're all very topical. One of the key areas where we refer to is, and I guess been the cornerstone of digital innovation and as part of these transformations, is machine identities. And the accelerating rate and adoption of cloud and native technologies really means securing and managing these identities is becoming critical. And there are a large number of organizations, many of them are our partners, and some you'll hear from in the coming days, that are focused on human and machine identities for a number of years. But the landscape is evolving. And how do you therefore consider and manage the IoT device identities that effectively are so significant in number, it creates different challenges. And that's very much where Device Authority focuses its energy, effort, technology, and advancing our roadmap on the right-hand side of this diagram to try and give that coupled, holistic, better together story for customers. So think of us in terms of how we manage that. And I touched on the scale, being one of the challenges. And, whether you look at the most recent stats, people refer to just over 16 billion globally connected devices. And we definitely see from customers who have been doing POCs and pilots in recent challenges, when you start getting to hundreds and then thousands, and some people are predicting hundreds of thousands of devices very quickly in the coming year or two, it suddenly becomes a very significant problem about how you're going to be able to manage and implement a zero trust framework for those number of devices. And in many cases, those devices are in different places in the world. They're outside of the internet. They aren't managed, to speak, and effectively humans don't interact with them. And actually this year at the RSA conference, automation was a very key theme that was pulled out, where if you focused on automation, you should be able to reduce the chances of breach by over 500%, which is a huge and significant number. So as the attack surface is broadening, the threat landscape is very much paramount, and so automation becomes a very topical thing. And that's very much been an area that we focused on in recent times. But that isn't the only area of consideration, and I just wanted to touch on, when you think about how you secure or in your supply chain, typically there are a number of areas that you need to consider. And it goes well beyond PKI to manage that sort of full life cycle through that supply chain. However, that is important. And I know, over half of the new projects around PKI are related to some form of IoT initiative that's typically, part of a digital transformation in an organization, touching on some of the things I touched on before. So a certificate model is very important. But it isn't the only challenge. There are other challenges, and data privacy comes up more in some sectors. So where data is critical, or there's some compliance requirements such as medical, it's very important that the end-to-end data flow is protected. And so that's another big consideration, and more we start seeing customers, considering that as part of their design or of their solution. But it's very, very worthy of note. The other thing is identity is now becoming the new perimeter. And if you consider this, most of the devices are outside of the firewall. So you can't rely on typical network security layers. So you have to have a different approach. You have to think about what you're going to do. So identity is becoming the new norm, and taking the approach from how you manage the identity of that device and the various ways of doing that at scale creates significant challenges. And at the end of the day, these devices interact with applications. So figuring out and working through, making sure that that device can be trusted, because the applications ultimately need to be trusted with the data that goes to and fro. So, considering how you roll that out is very, very important, and considering the ROI of that, because it can be hugely expensive if not thought through correctly. And also a universal trusted method is required. When you've got all of these different industries, different types of devices, being able to deliver secure updates is one of the challenges most people have in their organization. And most people, whilst they'll be driving some form of digital transformation, it isn't always down to new business models or new devices or new methods. It's very much also trying to solve some of the challenges that already exist in the field. So having the ability to work with a vendor like us that can deal with the retrofit scenario as well as the new is becoming very topical and very important, and has to be thought through. And then you have the life cycle. We talk about this. Some of the customers I've spoken to, they have manufacturing cycles for 10 years. They expect the devices to be out in the wild for 20 to 30 years. They don't expect them to return to depot. And in many cases, they might have to be refreshed or certain elements of them will have to be changed in terms of its steady state over time. So managing that becomes very complex and can be hugely costly if not planned and thought through. And then, of course, you've got regulatory requirements that are really gathering momentum. You've heard about the executive order from the White House. You've heard about the EU Cyber Resiliency Act. If you haven't, there's more information that we can make available about those. And only last week, CISA instructed the federal agencies in the US to secure internet exposed devices and gave explicit operational guidance under Directive 23-02 that requires federal agencies to secure network management interfaces of certain class of devices. So there's more and more activity and compliance required, and I think we definitely hear and see that from customers. Again, medical is one of those areas that I know people are very much researching, as are industrial and specifically government and public sector based organizations. And SBOM will be a topical theme, the software bill of materials and how you can attest an SBOM. So you'll hear about that in the coming days, about how that's becoming a very relevant part of the solution and what you need to do to consider that. And then there's this whole thing of AI, and I think there's this wonderful AI and convergence with IoT, which really looks at leveraging the intelligence of things to make actionable insights and actionable data. So we're looking at this very closely, and we've been developing to extend our offering and reach to solve some of the challenges that customers are going to have, to really try and make sure we can secure that dynamic fusion of AI and IoT, and we'll touch on that a bit more. So that's definitely something that customers are talking to about, how they can manage trusted insights and how they can ensure that the data that comes from the trusted device can be trusted. So that convergence is a very important future requirement, and we're definitely readdressing that in the coming months. The other thing I think worth mentioning is, there's been a lot of communication around the NIST cybersecurity framework, an excellent framework from an industry body put together to help customers. And at the end of the day, it's broken down into 5 key segments, and there's a number of sub legs in each of those in terms of best practice and what people should do. And this really is the only achievable way you can account to try and deliver zero trust, by approaching this framework. So definitely worth something looking at. And we often have customers talking to us, and you'll hear a session that talks about how to be able to implement in line with the zero trust using the NIST framework. So there's quite a lot of depth and breadth in all of these things. Some of these are topics in themselves, but I just wanted to touch on them for consideration. And then we've talked before, one of the key considerations in life cycle management is what role and where people play in that whole life cycle. And I think it's interesting, when we talk to people, we can talk to device manufacturers who are trying to figure out what they do with their devices, which is a very different conversation to someone who's actually making an application choice and has numerous devices they're going to be connected to an application. So the thing that has to be thought through, I think, really is where do you sit in the supply chain? Some people are looking to innovate and add advantages in line with making sure they can be trusted and secure for their customers. and some people are bringing out new business models. But who is the customer, and who are you ultimately looking to try and solve some of the security challenges for? And that again will be addressed when you look at some of the use cases and examples over in the coming days. So I touched before on the artificial intelligence of the Internet of Things, an exciting space and something that we've definitely recognised, that's very important. And at the end of the day, I think it's something that organisations are rapidly moving to. It can differentiate their business, and it can, there's significant challenges in being able to aggregate, interpret, and make these insights, but absolutely making sure that they can be trusted. So that's a perfect opportunity. And so why is AI exploding? You've got industry leaders like Microsoft have already signaled to the market that the time is now for AI. When you look at some of the acquisitions that they've made and the significant marketing momentum, you've got governments now taking serious attention to this in recent weeks, as a number of the significant powers around the world are trying to figure out how they can get benefits from this and then also manage the risk. And I think advances in such models, are providing so much data. It's trying to work out, well, what's the key data that we need to collect and that we can use that has real world life application. And again, you'll hear more about some of those examples in the coming days. And I think, the financial markets, in terms of the investment community, it's definitely something that's attracting significant attention in terms of the most highly rated sector. And people like Gartner and Forrester and others are heavily reporting on this space and effectively how it's evolving so quickly. So I guess, watch this space, and we want to help our customers with this as much as possible. And I think post-COVID, as people have looked to drive digital innovation, AI is very much coming at the forefront and the top of that agenda. So how that plays out for us and how we end up talking to customers in terms of how they're considering the various devices and things. And this goes across all sectors. So transport, utilities, government and defence, medical, as I touched on before, industrial, you've got smart connected factories and you've got smart connected devices. So there's a whole plethora of things in terms of where people are looking to gather information from either sensors or in fact the devices itself and aggregate that data. And then it's about, well, okay, how do we actually make some meaningful judgment from that to provide good insights, not just to people running their business, but also as their customers. And in many cases, these things can be used to market incremental services or innovate further in terms of their business. So it's a very topical area. But how do you therefore create that trust? And I think the way we look at this is there has to be clearly an implicit trust between the data and how that insight is interpreted and communicated. But also, how do you then create that explicit trust? How can you trust that device that is providing the data could be trusted? So there's a data trust challenge and a device trust challenge, and trustworthy AI requires absolute data trust, and that's very much the angle that we will be looking at in terms of our future offerings. So something to consider, and we hope to speak to customers in the second half of this year, some early customers, in terms of a preview version of Keyscaler AI. So moving I guess further on, and just coming back to the AI piece, is a key way to mitigate this effectively is this whole zero trust framework. So we've heard about zero trust in the past. There's been numerous podcasts, webinars, and almost every vendor is talking about how it can respond and provide some guidance in delivering a zero trust approach. But it's critical so that you can secure the devices and the sources of data. But it really starts with managing the credentials or the identities that I referred to before. And typically PKI is that first piece that often people talk to us about. And then, as I referenced earlier, the increasing number of challenges as you engage with customers, they look to roll out their projects that they're thinking about. So having that thought process and thinking those things through is very important. And I guess picking the right partners to work that is important. And then it's not just a matter of doing it one time only, it's providing you can have that continuous assurance, being able to mitigate those challenges through the life cycle. So again, there is a session specifically on that, and SBOMs will become very relevant in that. Because again, an SBOM cannot really validate a device once. Its state could change, but it always needs to be verified and never trusted, which is the foundational concept of zero trust. And I touched on before secure updates. So really 3 key things: zero trust approach, continuous assurance, and making sure you've got the ability for secure updates is one way, I guess an approach to try and mitigate against IoT exploits. So if you look at holistically, and often this is a picture that we use, we deal with a number of customer organizations that are delivering or rolling out devices. Some of them are multiple device types. But typically, Device Authority's solution, we work very closely with the cloud-based vendors. Microsoft, you'll hear from today. Yes, we're cloud agnostic, and we offer a lot of functionality to customers deploying in their cloud or on their premise. But what we have added in recent months, really to try and accelerate people's projects. One, people have gaps in knowledge. They have sometimes resource constraints internally. So how could they get their project kick-started quickly? So we've now launched a as-a-service model as well that it operates in the Microsoft cloud, run by us for customers. And we have customers moving quickly to start POCs and pilots, moving to a small limited production much quicker than they were before, because a number of their challenges are really resolved by the expertise that we can offer. So that's something to think about as you're looking to kickstart your project, is how we can help, and the methods we have effectively to accelerate that. And then as I mentioned before, we'll also be bringing out and considering the AI extension as IoT and AI converge. So look out for that at the back end of the year. But one thing I would say, and I think it becomes very apparent as you look for sustainability and security, through the supply chain, really the theme of the next 2 days is the role of partnerships. There isn't one company that solves all these challenges. In many cases, customers have already made corporate security choices. They've already got cybersecurity vendors, and we pride ourselves on making sure we work with the best, but we're also helping, and we've integrated into our platform to make it easy to deploy. So, making sure that we can help customers accelerate their time to market by having the right integrations, whether that's with a PKI vendor or a cloud vendor. We make sure people can use a solution to retrofit, because I said before, people have got challenges both with things they've already deployed, with new risks or the new risk landscape they need to solve, but also how they're looking to improve their security setup for their future business models, but also for future products. So making sure you can work with with organizations that can effectively help you with that zero trust approach for both incumbent in the field and also new products is going to be important. And people talk about extending to the edge. The edge is going further and further out, and people are gathering data from the edge. And often those edge devices go offline, do their clever stuff, and then they come back online. So there's a whole layer of sophistication that needs to be considered, how you can manage and resolve some of those challenges. And again, it's that partnership approach that becomes very important to make sure you can do it, especially with this converging IT and OT market. And then at the end of the day, having the ability to be able to discover things is also an important aspect. So, leveraging our edge capability, working with discovery tools is also an important step. So again, working with partners to be able to do that. So to try and give customers a more holistic view to solve some of the challenges, and I just thought I'd pick out some of the things that can be done by some of the key partners, because not one partner can do it alone. And I've talked about the ecosystem, and it is a rich ecosystem, and it's evolving all the time. And I just think, with recent White House executive orders, for example, you've seen new organizations like Cyfirma, Finite State, Archivist, and others forming about this whole SBOM concept. And we've added in, the ability to attest SBOM and make sure that you can validate continuously the SBOM authorization and creation, working with such partners. So the landscape continually changes, and identity has been at the backbone of that for the last few years. But I just wanted to pull out that, at one level you've got, based on my wheel before, you've got partners you work with who are thinking about secure by design. You've got customers who have already made key choices and big investments on enterprise platforms. They've made cloud application choices, or they've already made physical or cloud-based HSM or PKI decisions already that they need to leverage for certain use cases. And also partners. I mean, one thing that's been very encouraging for me or for us as a business in the last year or so really is the role of, you know, the big five now really owning and driving large digital transformations. And they are there pulling together a number of the key technology partners, of which we are one, you know, to help solve some of these significant problems. So the landscape is important, and it's very important that the ecosystem is understood and you're able to leverage those partnerships. And I guess independent, just from, you know, ignoring what I've said thus far, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that, you know, Device Authority has had some excellent recognition from industry analysts, and that's happened really over a series of years, but really around the technology that we bring to market, the way that it integrates with the existing ecosystem I touched before, but also the customer value that people are already getting. And so, you know, this is delved into by organizations like ABI or the Quadrant teams, and I just wanted to recognize and give you some comfort the fact we're being recognized for our technology and our customer traction. And in the next few days, you know, you're going to hear a number of use cases, and people will do you know, a very comprehensive job across a number of sectors. But I just wanted to give you a flavor. You know, when you look at our business specifically and the type of customers, you know, manufacturing has been, or the industrial sector in the middle there, is significant, and we're seeing that evolve really in two ways. You've got this smart factory and operations approach, and then the smart connected devices. Automotive, I've touched on before. There's a number of use cases or businesses, and it's not just about connected vehicles or key management and managing the identities on those keys. It's about how they also bind with cloud applications, and those insights that I referred to earlier are also secure. But also you've got people whose business is just building a new sustainable product to replace, you know, our old methods of energy, for example. So, you know, EV-based companies. And then on medical, which, you know, I think is very challenging in itself when you look at the innovation and the boundaries that the whole medical industry is pushing it. And it's not just one device, it's the multiple aspects of a significant device like a medical robot, or smaller sterilization and other types of equipment where they interact with other devices in a hospital ward. And they have different challenges that how they need to interact with those devices, but also with an application. So they're complex use cases in each of the verticals, and you need to, you know, I guess, break them down and be able to work with partners like Device Authority who can fundamentally help you solve some of those use cases. And I just wanted to touch, because I don't want to steal other people's thunder, but in terms of additional markets covered, there will be, you know, public sector specifically, and you see retail and edge use cases progressing, but also energy. In terms of, especially in Europe, we've seen you know, new opportunities, very much adopting cloud-based solutions and moving as well. So I think the use cases are broad. Hopefully you'll see some of the key themes around sustainability and securing that sustainability in the supply chain in the coming days. And that's really the end of my introduction. I guess one last push was just to say, go back, look through the agenda, pick out any key subjects you would like to you know, register for, or we will post out at the end a full list, so you'll be able to download them accordingly in your own time. Okay, so I'm going to finish there. I've got a couple of questions that I've seen come in, so if you just give me a second, I'm just going to okay, there's a good question. So what is going to be required to sustain zero trust on an ongoing basis? That's a great question. There's actually a session led by Tyler that specifically talks about a 9-step approach that effectively you could do that. So I think, you know, the foundation of that is being able to manage and the identity. But effectively, we have a framework. There's a number of best practices, and one thing I would say is that it evolves, and it's something that you always need to keep on top of. So, Pat, it's a great question, but a very long answer, and there is a session in itself specifically on that. I think I've answered the other question that was very similar to that. Okay, so another question. Most of the sessions are going to be between 30 and 45 minutes. Some people will offer the ability to answer questions live. Some may not, but always feel we have a team who's on standby. If you put in questions and they're not answered, what we will do is we will aggregate them all at the end and we'll come back to you individually if there are any specific answers, or we can post them all out as a group for those people that would like to see the answers to the questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I think that's the end of the first session. The second session kicks off in just under half an hour or so, and I will be kicking that off with our guest speaker, and I hope you get the most out of the next couple of days, and thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you.